Hello, everyone, and just want to welcome everybody to our first class. We will have these recorded lectures will start us off each week, and we will be able to come back to the material when we meet on Wednesday night. So this is an opportunity to review the lecture, and then we can have a discussion about it when we meet Wednesday. Please do read through the chapter. This is a really, really excellent text. You will learn a lot from reading it, and we'll be able to discuss it in more detail. So the first thing that we're going to start off with is this idea of performance anxiety. So the authors kind of go right to it. And the good news is that this is something that everyone's going to experience to one degree or another. So these are common fears. And when you start a process like this is what you can expect. Not knowing what to say, saying the wrong thing, or not knowing enough, or thinking you're deficient would be some of the fears that have been identified with new therapists. So it's really important to look at how these fears could be exasperated based on your own issues, your own family of origin, your own personality, and to mitigate them by remembering that these are the type of fears that get exasperated by our early experiences. We're not going to know in session that we're experience number one, not knowing what to say, but we will notice some internal dialogue of feeling lost. I feel like an imposter. I don't feel like enough. So these are just ways that can help you identify how these fears may be showing up. By the way, I just want to point out that I'm putting the page number here just next to each of the headings. So if there's something in the slide that you're particularly interested in, you can go back and check it out in the text. So be patient with yourself and really do view this as a long-term process. Very important. You want to be realistic about your expectations. This is a process where you get to learn from your mistakes, both as you're practicing and also when you're in practice. One of the tips is to simply focus more on what you're learning rather than on how you're doing, and to take a non-defensive attitude. We are going to be able to give each other feedback in our triads. And so just notice like how you're able to be non-defensive. If something you felt like you really blew it somehow, are you able to move on from that? So set an intention to focus on the client rather than what you're doing wrong. You could see yourself as being a little self-obsessed about the things that didn't go well. You want to increase your self-reflection so that you can develop a participant observer stance with yourself. You will get lots of opportunity to process what you felt didn't go well with supervisors. That's part of the learning process. And actually get provided with real life examples of how therapy plays out with issues that you felt were difficult. So in summary, this good news is that you already possess really important characteristics about what makes therapy work. So you already have sensibility. You already have intelligence. You already have a genuine concern for people, and you're bringing that all to your beginning their clinical practice. You also have good common sense. You have good judgment, and you have intuition. So it's really important to remember and to balance out your fears with what we already bring to our early education around in terms of being clinicians. So the authors define a treatment focus, and this will also help mitigate some of your anxiety. This refers to what is a case formulation or case conceptualization. In more basic terms, it's understanding what is really wrong here. Like, what is the client saying that they're struggling with? You obviously are going to be able to rely on theoretical framework to help you define this. And also your clients are going to present it to you with their maladaptive coping styles. Your internal experience is also going to help you determine a treatment focus. The way in which you provide empathy is going to shift, for example, depending on the person that you're working with. So this in and of itself will help you determine a treatment focus. So let's look at some core concepts. Process dimension, corrective emotional experience, client response specificity. So starting with the process dimension, this is not about the overt spoken content. This is about how the client and therapist interact. It is a shift away from what we're normally used to talk about how someone is relating to you. And also, you'll know you're working with the process dimension because you're working in the here and now. So if we think about our clinical example in the text with our client, Teresa, the problem that Teresa is bringing to you, which she's experiencing in her life with others, is this behavior of overcompliance. So when she can work on that more consciously with you, she is then able to change this behavior with other people. You may override it, you may miss it, you may allow her to act out her compliance with you, and that would be a rupture in the therapy. Or you may be able to identify it, bring it to attention, support her in exploring that with herself, within herself and with you. And that would be a way to restore the process dimension. And this is all a process of being reenacted and recreated in the therapy process. So the next topic is the corrective emotional experience, and they give you a little bit of a theoretical point of view. And this is really about working with what's happening now in the room. And this is a shift from working with the idea that you had to go into the past, analyze the past, in order to work with these maladaptive behaviors. It's both client-centered and cognitive behavioral. But what we're after here is getting the client to experience a new and satisfying response to an old pattern. So for example, with Teresa, can she be aware of her compliance and can she make adjustments to it? As a therapist, you want to ask yourself, am I recreating or co-creating a new and reparative relationship, or am I being drawn into something familiar and problematic? when they make the changes with you, they're going to make the changes with other people in their lives. How is it to be less compliant with me in session today? Would be a way to bring attention to the experience that Teresa would be having in changing this behavior. So it's an experiential rather than explanation. Clients believe actions, not words. Really important. The action is, let's stop, let's look at this pattern of behavior that you're acting out, that you're recreating with me in our session. That's the action that's taken. So in this slide, I think we're really looking at the fact that the therapeutic process is an emotional experience, and that these long ingrained relational patterns or experiences, in order to get shifted, they have to be experienced. It isn't something that words can explain. And that there's a deep sense of safety that happens when the client is, in a way, diverted from continuing to hurt themselves through these maladaptive behaviors. There would be something liberating for Teresa to realize that she does not only have to act in a compliant way. This would be pivotal for Teresa, and you would see it happen in the room. Her whole demeanor would shift. She would probably make contact with you rather than avoid contact. She would probably access an emotional range that you've never seen before. She would show a sense of confidence. Through this, the relationship is strengthened. And this is a really beautiful phrase. It's an earned, achieved credibility. You know, you're willing to take her into her process and provide her with another way of relating. And so now the relationship shifts. And it has meaning for both of you. I like this slide because there are going to be moments when there are mistakes. How the client responds to the mistake is going to involve their maladaptive responses. For example, if you reschedule with Teresa and mistakenly got the date wrong, Teresa will probably not be bothered by it. So here's an obvious example of where you might call attention to what it actually felt like for Teresa to make time for the session when you did not show up. So one of the best ways to realign therapy. The other point in this slide, however, is that because you become emotionally involved in the process with Teresa, so from your own emotional involvement, you can start to over-identify, and it is important to know when that happens. So noticing, paying attention to, reminding yourself about how you're different, even though there might be some overlap in terms of your experience around, say, issues with being overly compliant. So now we switch to collective response specificity. This means that Teresa's experience is going to tell you how you provide a response. When Teresa does not say anything about the fact that you missed the appointment, there is going to be a way that she does that, and there's going to be a way that you respond to the way that she does that. When you read the case study further, you'll get more clarity about Teresa as our model client here, and you'll be able to understand that you would respond to Teresa's silence or compliance differently than you might respond to somebody else's compliance. And there's a flexibility here that only comes out of paying close attention to the cues that are being offered to you in the session. Another way to say this is that there's an idiographic or subjective worldview unique to each client. And it's not just cookie cutter empathetic response. It's an accurate empathic response. And it's interesting that they note here that this is not something that most therapists provide. And the effort it takes to be specific is not something that's belaboring the obvious. It's just taking that one step further to put attention on your client's process. And there's a lot of meaning that comes out of that for the client. And again, requiring you view each person in exact and specific terms. And now we can understand why this all happens in the present moment. What's important about the specificity is that when changes are made in how she's with you, she can make the changes with others. That's the payoff of the hard work that you both go through. She will tell you if your interventions are spot on. There will be, I like this word, bold or weak, more engaged or disengaged, more passive, more indecisive. Will tell you, which means that the process is interactive. And then you can bring attention to the response that she provides. So there's a lot more to talk about in the chapter. I wanted to give you all an overview. There are theoretical and historical information in the chapter. I know that you all have had personality 1, so I'm not going to go over it in this lecture, but if there's any question about any of the theoretical or historical contexts for this process, please bring them up in class. We can talk about them. Again, I look forward to seeing everyone in class on Wednesday evening. And I do encourage you to take time to read the chapter. It's well worth it. And it will make our discussion, I think, more fruitful and more enjoyable. I'll see you all Wednesday night.